Hello viewers, welcome to my Doctor Who themed YouTube channel, Who Ventures, and in this video I'm going to review the Doctor Who Series 8 Episode 3 Robot of Sherwood. Now from seeing the conversations on Gallifrey Base, I've got a lot of extra thoughts to add. What I'm going to do first, I'm going to go through the general review first, and then I will go back to my thoughts about Gallifrey Base. So my introduction is, I wasn't fanatical about Robin Hood like Clara is, but my favourite programme when I was little, one of my favourite programmes, was Maid Marian and her Merryman. And that particular portrayal of Robin Hood was the Robin I had a huge crush on. The completely wimpy ones, like, oh, rather than I had a crush on the one, and he's gorgeous, and he had long hair. I think that's why I had a crush on him, because of the long hair, because I used to like Curtis Dykers, who had long hair, and this footballer guy who had long hair, so I had a thing for men with long hair. But I only just realised that Danny John Jules from Red Dwarf was in Maid Marian, because I used to love Maid Marian when I was little, and then it's only like a few months ago that I watched all of Red Dwarf, and then I thought, oh yeah, because somebody said it on Gallifrey Base. Like, oh yeah. So here we go with the general review part. Now, the opening scene is one I love. I love the intimacy of just being in the TARDIS, just the companion or companions and the Doctor just relaxing in the TARDIS. So I love the Doctor doing his chalkboard, working out all these mysterious Gallifrey things. And I love Clara spinning on that chair, because I like to spin on chairs like that too. And it reminds me of when Rory and Amy were just hanging out with Eleven, just playing darts in the TARDIS. So I really like how that portrayal of it just being the TARDIS as just a home and that. So I really enjoyed the opening and the angle that we see the Doctor, then we can see down to Clara on her chair. I really liked how that was angled. And there's a bit where, like, and then we get Clara saying she wants to see Robin Hood, and then it's in old-fashioned heroes, only in old-fashioned storybooks. And then Clara looks at the Doctor and she says, "You're pretty heroic." And then the Doctor's looking the other way, and Capaldi does the perfect look. It's like sort of unsure but kind of flattered, and then he licks his spoon. Capaldi's just so good at just the subtle facial expressions that express just like so much. He's awesome at that. So I started a thread asking which recipe from the recipe book he was licking off his spoon. So I thought that was a good thread to start, because apparently scripted it was yogurt, but that's just boring. So it was something a lot more exciting than just yogurt. And what I liked was he was talking about, oh, we could go here, we could go Ice Warriors, we could go this, and then he says tumescent arrows of half-light. No, and these are apparently a group of spacey wacy girls. I thought that was quite tumescent arrows. That's rather phallic, that is. So, and that you got a Polaroid of them. Really, a Polaroid, not just a normal camera version of them, a Polaroid of these spacey wacy girls that can fragment reality into many things. Interesting. And then the TARDIS lands and Robin shoots an arrow into the door, which is poor Tardis, but it's good because the Doctor takes the arrow out and the door heals over. And I quite liked when Robin's like, because that was funny. And especially, do people ever punch you in the face? Like, wow, good job I'm here. That was really, I love Grumpy Doctor. I love that. I love that he's not, although I loved Matt and David, I love that he's not all, I love that he's got a sort of a grump about him. And then Robin called him Bony Rascal because I thought that was funny. Then Clara. Jenna Coleman's costume in this episode was amazing. I really liked her earrings and it inspired me by this beautiful hair chain. I thought she looked beautiful in that outfit and the long hair she had that the Tardis gave her, because there's a hairdresser's in the Tardis. I thought that costume was perfect, and I really liked the earrings, the wings. It just looked beautiful. Now the lead up to the spoon fight was funny because Robin challenges him to a duel, and then Paldy puts a glove on, then sneaks in, flipping him the bird. I thought it was hilarious. That was brilliant. And then we get into the spoon fight, and there's like lots of showing off, and then we get to the Errol Flynn comment, and we get a knob joke. It's like, oh, Errol Flynn, famous for his big. It's like, I thought I do like an sort of philosophy, intelligent thinking, but I do like toilet humour and slapstick and knob jokes. I think they're hilarious. So I do like serious stuff, but I do like silly stuff. Well, the silly stuff probably makes me laugh loads. I just giggle away at any toilet humour and knob jokes. And then there was the very dramatic bit where Robin is sliced off the Doctor's button. It's like, oh, you can't attack the coat. But it's okay, because apparently, according to some theories, he goes off and sits in the TARDIS and sews the button back on. So it turns out alright in the end. And then the there's a sort of a joke, Doctor, my box. That's cute, but also a bit rude too, a bit saucy. It's my box, not your box. Because it's like a euphemism for girls' bits. That's why I found it funny. Now, Ben Miller as a Sheriff of Nottingham, not a patch on Tony Robinson. I'm sorry, Ben, you were good, but he's not my Sheriff of Nottingham. That completely goes to Tony Robinson with his very saggy tights. He's brilliant. And then we go and visit Robin and his Merryman in his hideout. But where's the Major Oak? Now, the Major Oak apparently is only about 800 years old. So at the time of Robin Hood in the 1100s when they visited, it would have been a very small oak indeed, maybe even an acorn. So that's why the Major Oak, a huge part of the legends, and everybody should know it, and it's very famous. That's why, because it's apparently it's the most famous tree in Britain. And yeah, and I have actually visited Sherwood Forest, but there's something that's sort of gone a bit weird about my brain, and that it makes some of my memories just feel all dreamy, like dreams. But I do remember there's like, so it's weird because the landscape is little and I can see sort of tiny bits of the memory. So I think I did go to Sherwood Forest on some sort of school trip, right? It was some sort of special, I don't know if it was a special day or if they always like have events like that. But I did visit the Major Oak. I'm pretty sure I did. But yeah, that's probably a good explanation why the famous Major Oak wasn't in the episode. But it is a good tree, and I recommend everybody to go and say hello to it. Now, then we got the doctor going around testing out the Merryman to see if they were all real. So that was very funny, and I like that bit. This isn't a sandal. Oh wait, it is. And then he has his sonic hyped-in needle things. That's a bit scary, but very interesting. And I spotted a blooper. There was a sharp cut where Clara is going like this. Then the next cut, which is continuous cut, she's got her arms down by her side, and then it cuts continuous cut back, and they're up here again. And on the edit, there's no time for her to put her arms down and put them back up again. See, that is a little blooper I spotted. And then we got a mention of the miniscope from Carnival of Monsters, which is why at the moment is my favourite classic Who episode. I love the miniscope because I love one of my obsessions as sort of extremes of scale, like really big things where I can pretend to be a borrower, and really tiny things, but I don't pretend to be a giant. I only pretend to be a borrower. But I am fascinated by tiny little things, and I love, like, it's a small world ride in Disneyland Paris. After you've been on the boat and the dolls have sung at you actually go in this room and you look inside the houses and peepholes, and you see inside the houses. And there was another thing at the opticians, because I changed my opticians because my opticians used to be Boots opticians, but they moved the opticians into the massive big Boots, so there's too much sensory overwhelming stuff in the big Boots. So I switched back to Vision Express, which is just a shop with glasses. So if I go to Vision Express, I know it's just going to be a shop with glasses. Whereas if you have to go to the Boots optician, you have to go through the whole massive load of Boots with all the stuff on the shelves. You have to go down the stairs, and people can see you trying on the glasses, and that's why I don't approve of. That's why I only think opticians should be in their self-enclosed shops. Because anyway, I've gone on a tangent. I'm doing a MOOC. This is another tangent. I'm doing a MOOC about how to reason and argue, and this says like how all about going off on a tangent when you're talking about stuff. But I think that's innate in me, going off on a tangent. So that's why I love the reference to the miniscope, and that's why I love Carnival of Monsters, because I love looking at tiny little stuff and looking through like peepholes and like them 3D stereoscopes and stuff. I love all that. So I was really happy at that reference. Now, Clara's lovely hair jewellery inspired me to buy this lovely hair jewellery from BoXOXO. And then we get a bit about Clara. Now, somebody said a thread on Gallifrey Base that because Clara said to Robin, "Why are you so sad?" that means she lacks empathy, because she was apparently blunt. But it's complete opposite. That's complete opposite. Of course, she doesn't lack empathy. Nobody actually lacks empathy, apart from some maybe really horrible people. But you have to empathise with them, because if really horrible people lack empathy, then you have to empathise that their brains make it hard for them to have empathy. But obviously that doesn't mean you approve of really horrible people's actions. So I thought Clara seeing that Robin was sad shows a ton of empathy. and then the green canopy bit that follows on from my little bit about the major oak. Now, I thought Robin's hair was plaited lovely, it had lovely braid in it. Now, I find plaits really difficult, so I'm very admiring of Robin's lovely braided hair. And then we had the important comment about the weather, about how it was autumn, but it was no wind and everything was green and luscious like the springtime. And then Clara says, but why can't, so sort of implies, why can't it be all nice and luscious? And the doctor says, have you ever been to Nottingham? And now that is an important plot point. And then we have the gold arrow, the fantasizing about the gold arrow in the archery contest. And Clara says to the doctor, when did you stop believing in everything? And I've noted down that could be seen as a message to fans being grumpy about everything not being realistic or proper. It's like, sort of, when did you stop suspending your disbelief and just enjoying the ride? I think that's the message about the fans. Then we have the archery contest. I love that the doctor's arrow was a rainbow feather, because I like rainbows, and I thought it was cute and looked really pretty because it all the colours. And then I thought the split the arrow contest was kind of rude, and it was like a penis contest. I said penis. I said a rude word on my video, so it's not a rude word. It's all about virility, and they're shooting their arrows and shooting their things out of their penis, and I thought it was funny. So then the robot knights, I thought the design of them was really cool because they had like their sculptured face, and then you had the blue lasers. I really liked the sculptured face. And then we got another reference to the Patriot here. We got, ha! It's like finished Unicado. It's like, yay! I thought that was brilliant. I loved that. It was amazing. And then I laughed at another thing. I laughed at Robin Hood saying turkey cocks. Because, well, not because of this, but in the episode with the gangers, Matt's doctor said, oh, I love a good cockerel. And I laughed at that too because I'm juvenile like that. And I thought it was funny. And then the doctor said, shut it, hoodie. I thought that was good too. And then he's laughing again because something with Capaldi is like, he's all grumpy and that, and then does these funny ways of saying these words like, he's laughing again. And I thought that was so funny. It was so funny. And then there was a bit, he'd like to see if his head keeps laughing if we chop it off. Now that was very controversial because they actually had to cut out a cut scene. And I have seen the cut scene, but don't go looking for the cut scene. If you want to, it's on Daily Motion. But that doesn't mean I look at spoilers or anything, Mr. Stephen Moffat and Samuel Anderson and Peter. That doesn't mean I look at spoilers or anything. I just was interested to see what the scene was that they cut out. And the scene was that they cut out explained that the sheriff was actually a sort of metal man, sort of a cyborg, because originally the spaceship landed on the human sheriff and they rebuilt him. We can rebuild him. So he was actually a robot. So, but the way they found that out was Capaldi's doctor and Clara helped. The doctor sort of chucks a sack over him. I couldn't really make it out properly. Robin swings his sword and the sheriff's robot head comes off, but because he's a robot he still talks, but it's his head talking on the floor and his headless body walking around and holding on to Clara. And then Robin chucks the sheriff's head back to him so the sheriff can be all in one piece and fight him fairly and equally, and then the sheriff lands in the pot of gold. So I actually thought the scene was better without that. The episode was better without that scene, but it also changed the interpretation of the ending, that it made it seem like they pushed a fully human sheriff into a vat of boiling gold, a bit like Viserys' death in Game of Thrones, where he got molten gold poured over his head and it ate his brain. So that's the controversy of the cut scene. Where was I? So I have another juvenile thing to say about the scene where they're chained up in this sort of cellar bit and it's all mucky, because there's a big juvenile thread about, did Robin Hood and when they were trapped, did he really shit his pants? Now, I think they were asking, did Tom Raleigh, the actor who played Robin Hood, shit his pants, do proper method acting? So there's a whole thread about that, and he said, and there's a bit saying, I'm biding me time, and I thought that was like, and I sort of made up something in my head when I saw that on my rewatch. He's raking a turtle's head in his tie. So it's like sorry. And then there was the sonic screwdriver speech, which is good because it sort of referenced the fans who have been complaining about he always fixes everything with his sonic. So Jenna was challenging the doctor, Clara was challenging the doctor to come up with a solution that doesn't involve his sonic screwdriver. So I thought that was a good reference. Now, the gold being made into the circuit board, that relates to the conclusion. But I thought it looked cool, and it is feasible science. And then we see Jenna is going facing up against the sheriff, and Clara is facing up against the sheriff. And I thought Jenna was brilliant in that scene. And then the sheriff goes through what's in the doctor's pockets, and there's a big block of sandwiches, and I think they are definitely cheese sandwiches. And says, "Oh, it's quite a gallimaufry." Now that references Colin Baker's book, because he wrote a book, Gallimaufry, and then after I learned that Colin Baker had wrote a book called Gallimaufry, I learned that Gallimaufry isn't actually a made-up Doctor Who word, it is actually a word. I think it's sort of the meaning, sort of a mixture, sort of a random mixture of things, or sort of a mess of things. So I thought it was really good that they put that word in. Then we had Robin. Robin's got to do the mooing, and then the Scots are strangers to vegetables. I love that line. And then Robin was very convincing moaning, and then Dad said, "He's soiled himself." I loved it. It was hilarious. And then said, "There's a bounty. It's a big bounty." And then I just thought, well, no, it's not a fun-size bounty getting a selection box. It's the super-sized bounties. But then Robin headbutted the guard, and then said, Robin says to the doctor, "Soiled myself," and then. And the doctor says, "Did you? That's getting into code." It's funny. I love this episode. It's like a comedy episode. It's brilliant. and then they're juvenile and they fight over trying to reach keys to unlock them, and they're very glad that Clara didn't see that. And then the sheriff's all bragging about this brave, clever, handsome man, and that sort of talks about the Doctor too. Then we get the exposition about the Metal Man. Their spaceship crashed. The mechanical men imparted their secret onto the sheriff. Now, without the cut, that would have indicated that the sheriff was a robot, but they cut that bit so it didn't really fit. And then says, first Nottingham, then Derby. I was like, Lincoln. Now, Clara then says, wakes up. Now, I've forgotten if that is the real place or if that's the place on Maid Marian and Her Merry Men, or Men in Tights, so I forgot that bit. And then when the Doctor made a joke about ornamental plant stand, and Robin Hood can't stop laughing. And then we see that cutout of the window, and I thought it was the moon shining through the window. I think we were meant to think that, but it turned out it was sort of the door of the spaceship. And then we see the Robin Hoods, and we see a cameo of Patrick Troughton, and that is brilliant. I thought that was awesome too. And then it turns out the engines are leaking radiation, and then we sort of get a spacey-wacy bit. This radiation has a benevolent effect on this area where Robin Hood, benevolent effect on Sherwood Forest. So it makes it all beautiful weather, all sunny, all green. And then there's the next bit, and it's an oppressed workforce needs the illusion of hope. So that is sort of a sociological element that did appear in the episode. So at this point, the Doctor thinks Robin is a robot. And then we get a scene where... Hang on, I missed a bit. There's another scene where the moon is reflected in the water, and I think that's beautiful. I think I've got mixed up with my notes again. I thought that was interesting and beautiful, and thought the moon had a very poignant sort of effect thing. Anyway, the matrix of gold was to repair the engine circuitry because there's too much damage to the engine, and the engine needs to make orbit to not explode. Now, the gold content was needed to seal the engine breach, so the gold content wasn't used as the engine as a combustion because gold isn't got that qualities, but gold can lubricate parts on NASA used gold to lubricate parts on a spaceship that makes the engine run better. So my theory about, I'll do this in the wrong order, but my theory about the golden arrow is that they shot the golden arrow up into the bottom of the spaceship. It hit a bit of the engine where there was still a little bit of a breach, sealed the breach, lubricated the engine, but the mechanical men had got their calculations wrong, and so their engine reached its maximum capacity, but it was too much for the whole spaceship, so it exploded. So that's my theory about the golden arrow, and because of this spacey-wacy radiation benevolence effect, which, because everything was still green, it seemed to be still in effect, so that's where the arrow reached the bottom of the spaceship, because there was no weather to affect its course, and the doctor mentioned just before they fired the golden arrow that he made his own arrow have a homing device. So why shouldn't the golden arrow have a homing device as well? So that's my theory. And then, yeah, the doctors sort of chained up with Maid Marian, and then it says, like, then there's a bit about whether he's locked up, so blah blah blah. And would he free? And it's like so funny because like the other line just bursts out with these really funny lines, and it doesn't really funny. It's like, oh, how did he free? I love that. I love how he does that. And then there's a lot of exposition about the engine and the capacity and what the gold is doing. So if you listen carefully, you can work out a theory that fits within the Doctor Who universe and fits the story. Now, I noticed that when the robots come in again with their lasers, and the Doctor thinks of using the decorative plates and the banquet dishes to fire the lasers back at the monsters, the theme music there I thought is very Game of Thronesy. I got a big hint of Game of Thrones theme music, which was actually pretty cool. So we got all that about what the gold is being used for. Then opiate of the masses. I like that line, that line was in there, because I learnt about that in one of my other MOOCs, communication science. So I liked that line was in there, and then kids can, what does that mean? And then they can learn about communication science. Then there's another juvenile thread, but it's in the general section on Gallifrey Base, and it's all about people going to the toilet on Doctor Who, and and then people saying when Robin stuck his sword in the tapestry that they had to edit out the skid marks because he left his poo all down the tapestry and he slid down the tapestry. So I thought that was a funny idea. And then the sheriff wants Robin boiled in oil, but he gets but Robin sort of gets the sheriff boiled in gold. And then because they took away the cutscene, the sheriff says, I'm half man, half engine. So it doesn't technically make sense, but it could sort of be like, I'm so brilliant, I'm so fantastic. So, but that also means when he falls into the boiled molten gold, that means people perceive him as fully human. So that's why taking out the cutscene sort of screwed up the sort of story a bit, but it didn't. I preferred it without the cutscene anyway. So I don't know. I'm not saying that I like really grisly, gory stuff, but I do watch Game of Thrones. So I don't know what my perspective is on that really. So after that, we get to the spaceship taking off. Not enough gold to make it to orbit. Now, I think that's because there's still a gap in the engine. It hasn't completely sealed the engine breach because they've been interrupted by the Doctor and Robin, like messing up the sheriff because the sheriff was helping them. And now the Doctor's come to get them and destroy them all, so they need to take off really quickly. So, but they haven't finished sealing the engine breach. And then the Doctor realises, oh no, they haven't finished sealing the engine breach. They need more gold to seal the engine breach. And the Doctor possibly knows that you need to fire the golden arrow, and that's where the engine is, because it's very clever. It's all right on his head. It's very clever. And they fired the arrow, and because of the benevolent this space radiation causes a benevolent effect, it's still an effect. So that's how it gets to the spaceship without any weather affecting it, and how it sort of benevolent effect sort of I think the benevolent effect sort of made Robin Hood and his men really merry, and benevolent effect had an effect on the physics around Sherwood Forest. So that's why the arrow could reach the spaceship, and it also had a homing beacon in the arrow. So that's how it got into the spaceship. So there's a theory that fits. Now I interpreted that as the Doctor didn't expect the ship to explode. He just wanted to make sure it got into orbit, but he wasn't expecting it to explode. So there's some people saying it was a bit weird that Clara was celebrating that the ship exploded. Now I'm not sure what to think about that. Possibly it wasn't that appropriate, but they were sort of deadly robots with just killing everything. And they, apart from in contrast to the half-faced man who was explained that he wanted to go to the promised land, and that he was sort of explaining how all these parts had started to make him human, but these robots, to Clara, I guess, if you was in that situation, they're just deadly robots, the enemy, like Daleks. So then that's why Clara would cheer, I guess. But people are multifaceted. So, and then we get the lovely bit between Robin and the Doctor. And anyway, Clara says, "Don't give up, Robin. Always be amazing." And I thought that was really good because, like, even though people perhaps don't remember him as a man in the future, that means he should always continue to be a good man. And then Robin Hood says, "History is a burden. Stories can make us fly. If we both keep pretending to be heroes," that's like one of them square brackets. If we both keep pretending to be square bracket heroes, perhaps others will be heroes in our name. And then he says, "I'm just as real as you are." And then Marion, who was either in the Tardis or hiding behind the Tardis, he's together with Marion again. So my point of that is that this benevolence effect that the spaceship was having on Sherwood Forest, it will wear off, and he won't be living in a fairy tale anymore. But that doesn't mean he can't be a good man and look for justice and have love, and that love isn't a fairy tale, but that doesn't give it any less meaning, and that you don't need to have perfect conditions to become a legend. You can be a good person whatever your situation on the earth. So it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to be merry all the time. I think that's a good point too. If you don't have to be like, it's okay to be sad sometimes and to feel, sometimes it's okay to sort of feel powerless and weak sometimes, because being just laughing and being superficial here, that's not getting into the true lessons and what it means to be human. So the controversy on the Gallifrey base is that some certain people on Gallifrey base seem to be getting incredibly angry about whether the golden arrow bit was accurate enough. Now, from my rewatch, I've interpreted that this episode is not about the science. It's got robots and spacey waste stuff because it is Doctor Who, but this episode was not about science at all. It was not about exactly how spaceships work exactly. This episode was about stories. And it's the story of Doctor Who's wilderness years, of what fans did, that we kept the legend of the Doctor alive through stories. And that's how people become legends. Because books are our Tardises. You don't need a blue box. Pick up a storybook and there are hundreds and thousands of Tardises in the world that can take us all these incredible places. And that means civilization is built on sharing stories. And by being good people now and telling and inspiring others to be heroic and good people, and then writing stories about each other, we can become legends for future generations. And that's the importance of stories. And I wrote a paragraph here that this episode teaches kids, if not about perfect science, but about the importance of sharing stories and sharing your experience on planet Earth, and that historical accounts can inspire future generations. Like the stories about, they've had a lot of the stories about people in the World War One, and they've been narratives, not necessarily textbooks with facts, but they've been stories, narratives about, and they become legends because we're always continually telling stories, and it's important that civilization continues to do that. And that with life, it doesn't have to be about facts, and it doesn't have to be like transient text messages and Twitter. It's all well and good, but we must continue to imagine and create stories to pass on to future generations to keep civilization and humankind progressing, because that's how we've become from cavemen, by telling stories and continually telling new stories to future generations. Our world is built on stories, and that's the lesson that Doctor Who learns, the Doctor learns, that our lives are built on stories, and that's on Earth, at least, that's how stories make the world go round, make Earth go round. And stories and passing on stories are our most valuable assets. So I think that's what the episode was about. And that's why I disagree with people who are getting really irrationally angry and frustrated about a little bit of science in the Doctor Who universe, which clearly is not our universe anyway. They're missing the whole big picture of it, showing we can all be legends as long as we pass on stories and inspire each other to be good people. So that is my review of Robot of Sherwood. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching. Yay!